Well, hello and welcome. This is Insight with Political Tours, the travel company run and led by reporters around the world. Let's dive straight in. Leading investigative journalist Holger Roonemaa has been uncovering dirt and skullduggery across the Baltics for the past few years, much of it linked to Russia. Holger is the head of investigative journalism at the media company Ekpress, based in Tallinn, and he recently led our Baltics Tour. Hello and welcome, Holger.
Hello, Nick. Nice of you to have invited me.
I'm very glad you're going to be here. It's going to be an excellent session. For anyone who's naive enough to think that Russia just wanted to get along with the West, plots, subterfuge, cyber attacks, smugglers, petty criminals and spies, it's all here. All in an attempt at undermining countries and governments in the West. Of course, all of it led by Moscow. We've got a lot to get through. We've got an overview of how Russia operates with its focus on operations in the Baltics. And then maybe a bit later, we've got examples of stories that you have been looking at over the past few years. Just to give us a bit of a recap, can you say what Estonia's had to deal with way before 2014, way before this year, and going back really, I think, into the 2000s? Just give us a quick overview.
Well, I can go back like 700 years because Estonia's history is quite tightly connected to that of Russia or different forms the country has had over the last centuries. But okay, I will not dig so deep into history. Let's say 2007 was a critical year in Estonia's independence because that's when the world famous historically first state-organized cyber attacks against another sovereign state happened. And that was Russia's organized cyber attacks against Estonia. Why? At the time, the government wanted to remove a Soviet wartime, Second World War time statue from the center of Tallinn. And Russia didn't like that. Kremlin didn't like that. And they started like a huge influence campaign. They started organizing public opinion, local Russian ethnicity, public opinion against removing the statue. There were street protests, there were clashes. One person was killed. A lot of buildings were destroyed. But at the same time, as well, in 2007, there were cyber attacks against Estonian state institutions, against media, against banks, online banks. Which was like pretty awful at that time.
So, I was
a very young reporter at that time. Yeah.
That was fairly shocking. But then, I mean, what was possibly surprising? I mean, first of all, Estonia is very well known for tech, and having to take on the cyber attack was one thing. But then there was a shock in 2013 when it wasn't just cyber attacks, but in actual fact, there seemed to be a pretty major infiltration of Estonia's government and security services as well.
No, like you name it, we've had it. Estonia is a very small country. Like just as a context, we are 1.3 million people. We are 43,000 square kilometers in territory. But because of our closeness to Russia, because of our political history, because of being occupied, because Russia still sees or wants us to be in their influence zone, like together with Latvia, Lithuania, and the other Baltic countries. They've tried everything here. They've tried propaganda, disinformation campaigns. They've abducted our security officers from inside Estonian territory and sent them to prison in Russia. They've tried to influence us politically. They've tried to set up local Russian language, Kremlin-controlled parties, basically. Estonia has also been like the kind of like test bed. First, they try here something, some of the tricks, and if it works, then they export it to other Western countries. For example, what you saw in the States with the presidential elections 2 cycles away, they had pretty much tested all the same things, how it works. How it would work in smaller countries such as Estonia.
Okay. We've got, and we don't normally do slides on this, but we've got so much detail and a lot of stuff is going to be quite new for people. So we've actually got slides to go through, but we will, so for those of you listening to this, we will describe things as much as possible. But let's just start with what we've got here. So go on.
Okay. And you, Nick, just guide me through the way and stop me and interrupt me as possible. I will not make a longer introduction of myself anymore. I just want to emphasize that, yes, I am running a small investigative team in one of the largest media companies in Estonia. but as well, like a lot of the work that we do is actually international. That we work together with the ICIJ, with all the leaks, the Pandora Papers, the Panama Papers, etc. And we work with OCCRP, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. But we also have a lot of other international collaborations, which means that a lot of our most serious stuff is also available in English language in one or other.
And you've got examples of your stories on the right-hand side there, which we'll cycle back to, because those are sort of three different examples across the board of some of the activity that Russia's up to. And we'll come back to those stories in a second.
Yeah, exactly. Like I mentioned, Russia has had a huge interest in Estonia, both as well, not only in political and the military level, but also on the intelligence level. Estonia has arrested and convicted at least 20. I think the number is now somewhere between 25, somewhere close to 25, maybe even closer to 30 spies who have been spying in Estonia for Russian special services interests. These spies have been recruited by all three most important Russian intelligence agencies, which are the FSB, the GRU, the SVR. And among those spies there are like really important high-level people who were responsible for setting up Estonian national security system, people who work in Estonian counterintelligence agency KAPO, but also like really low-level wannabe spies, like some students from St. Petersburg who have come to study IT in Estonia, or smugglers who smuggle cigarettes or
so it's comprehensive. It's a comprehensive program, and using all three of Russia's spy agencies, both the military intelligence, foreign intelligence, and the FSB, which is actually nationally based intelligence service.
Yeah, out of these people that you see here on that photo, it's a selection of some of the guys and a few women who have been arrested. I've had the personal pleasure of interviewing two of those guys. I will skip this one. This is a guy I met in the prison in northeastern Estonia, a vastly Russian-speaking area, by the way. His name is Alexei Vasilyev, and he is exactly this guy who moved to Estonia from St. Petersburg to study IT in a vocational school. And when he came to Estonia, Russia's FSB approached him and said that, okay, you are going to be learning in Estonia. We want you to help us in our work. He was 19 years old at that time, I believe.
He looks incredibly young. He's got leather jacket.
I think this photo is probably like when he was 17 or something like that. He comes from a very poor family. He only had mom. He didn't have father around him, and his mom had a really small daughter as well, like 2 or 3 years old at that time. They were living in a small apartment in St. Petersburg. So this boy, Alexei, he saw a chance to make something relevant to help his country, but also to earn some money. And he was promised to be taken to excursions by the FSB as a form of payment as well. But he thought that it's something like romantic, a little bit like James Bond style, do something but secret, and so on. And they tasked him. First thing they tasked him with was to break into a Wi-Fi network of an Estonian state institution. Which one, I don't know. But he got the code or something like that. And then when he went to deliver that information back across the border from Estonia to Russia, he was trying to cross the border in Narva, which is a border town. And then the Estonian counterintelligence, Estonian border guards actually stopped him, told him that, whoa, our narcotics dog smelled something in your car, but please step out and let's have a conversation. And he told me in that interview in prison that at that moment I knew that I was busted. That I had never done anything with drugs. I had never done a joint, nothing like that. That this needed to be a false excuse. And he was arrested there on the spot, put to prison. And the way how he looked in prison, I think I interviewed him when he had been sitting in jail for half a year, something like that. He was so broken, but that was so sad to see how they had just like ruined this one young guy's life, but he didn't understand how he had gotten into this mess. When he was arrested, he hadn't had any visit or contacts from the Russian embassy, from the Russian diplomats. They hadn't given him any legal help. And most importantly, what angered him was that when his mom in St. Petersburg tried to contact the local FSB and asked about his son, Alexei, sitting in prison in Estonia and what they are doing to help, then they declined any knowledge of Vasily. Which in the end meant that his mom lost the apartment where we were living in. She couldn't afford to pay rent because Alexei was helping his mom to pay the rent. And then they needed to move out of home and essentially becoming almost as well as homeless. But it was like, these are some of the people that Russian special agencies are recruiting, and it's so easy for them to do. Is he still in
jail now? Is he still there?
He's out now. He got out, I think, a year or two ago, and I don't know what happened to him, because what are the options for him? He has been sitting in jail in Estonia for espionage, so he really can't return to Russia, because if the Russian special services don't know, maybe he has been like turned to Estonia's side. They can't trust him anymore. He doesn't have any real perspective or future in Russia. No one trusts him in Estonia. So this guy's life basically is like, I can't say the life is over, but the outlook in his life there is nothing to do with it. This guy was really broken. It's one of the saddest interviews I've ever done in my life, like sitting opposite him with the prison window separating us and talking through the phones.
As far as they're concerned, I mean, he's useful insofar as what he could achieve potentially. He's not big.
But there are other guys who understood much more about what they were doing. They were not like, maybe they were not so much more important to Russia, but the real trend that happened somewhere like 3 to 7 years ago was that Russia started sending to Estonia these small-scale criminals who were smuggling, fuel, tobacco, Vietnamese people, and tobacco, across the border from Russia to Estonia, because in Estonia it's so much more expensive. It was a big business in the southeastern part of Estonia. There were many criminal gangs doing it. The territory, the land territory between Estonia and Russia is like swampy, forest states. It was really easy to move across the border without being noticed.
We've just been there with you. I was actually struck in Narva. There was a small sign saying "Border, do not cross." I mean, I think we had to go across a riverbed, but I didn't want to try it.
One Estonian journalist got into big trouble because he did a TV story about how he was jumping from Estonia to Russia and back this way. Russia, now I'm in Russia, now I'm in Estonia, jumping back to Russia, jumping back to Estonia. So he was illegally crossing the border like many times in a row. He got into, just to prove a point that
it was pretty porous,
like no one is able to control the border.
Yeah. So we're looking at Pavel Romanov, his mugshot. So tell us about Pavel.
Pavel was running one of the most prominent smuggling gangs. He was living right on the border, on the Estonian side of the border with Russia. His gang was somewhere around 10 to 15 people strong. And for years, they had been taking illegal tobacco from Russia to Estonia and then selling it here. They were making nice money out of it, probably in the amount of tens of thousands of euros or dollars. But we were getting extra rich for it. But this guy was at the same time also working for the FSB. Because he was living and then operating in the southeastern part of Estonia. He was tasked by the FSB to keep track of Estonian border guard movements, to take photos of military installments in that region, to take photos of military vehicles, military exercises, to gather the names of people working in the border guard.
This at all, or what's his part of the bargain?
Yes, they did get a payment. but that's not like much. So again, like maybe you get like a few €100 with every now and then.
Yeah.
But the real important thing why these guys do it is that they don't have an option. The Russian border guard, which is part of the FSB, officially part of the FSB, they know about what's going on. They still like have an idea about the gangs. So they approach people like Romanov, many others exactly like him, and then tell him that, yes, we know what you're doing, but what you are doing here is purely criminal. And now there are two options. One, we can put you in jail in Russia for the illegal smuggling that you're running here. Or second, you can continue your operations. In fact, we will help you with it because there is no need for you to worry. But we will arrest you on the Russia side. You don't need to worry about that. And that's not it yet, but we will also pay for you to do it. We will also help you monetarily, but you can actually improve your business.
Yeah.
But at the same time, please carry out these tasks as well. So these people kind of like, what are your options? Like either sit in jail in Russia or make some money and then help Russian special services. And then for them, it's a very easy choice also, like economics or business wise, but why not like grab the opportunity? It helps.
But the fact is that he was recruited in 1994, and when did he get discovered?
Yeah, this guy is actually very interesting because he claimed to me that he was, when I interviewed him a few summers ago, I visited him when he was already out of prison, had just like a few months earlier gotten out of prison. And he told me that he had been recruited in 1994 by the FSB, but in Chechnya. But at that time, he was taking used cars from Germany to Chechnya and then selling the cars there in Grozny. And that's when the war started. Russia needed help and intelligence from inside Chechnya. And he was allegedly close to Johar Dudayev's family, the important military and political leader in Chechnya at that time. So he started selling his services to the FSB at that time already. But when he moved to Estonia, the FSB found him again. And then like the new tasks in Estonia continued. Other people, like sometimes they managed to operate for 1 year, sometimes for 3 years, sometimes for like maybe even 5 years. But the problem here is that when they get caught by the Estonian counterintelligence, the Russian FSB, like they don't need to worry about it. That they can instantly go and hire someone else. These guys, they don't have any like real knowledge of what to turn into to Estonian side. So Russian FSB doesn't lose any like intelligence value as such. Yes, maybe the Estonians will learn like what photos or what like small tasks we're carrying out, but in the big picture, it doesn't change anything. So Russia can really just like easily, the FSB can really easily just play with these guys' lives. If they get caught, like, so what? Let's move on. Let's take the next one.
And where does Pavel live? He's living in Estonia. He's a Russian.
He's living like 300 meters inside Estonia's border with Russia.
Right.
It's like strategically the best located place. But, yes, I visited him at his home, and then from there to the border with Russia, it's like a few minutes walk basically through the forest.
Okay, next, let's move on.
Yeah, of course, because we only have 1 hour. This is a little bit like, this is much more high-tech. These guys on the photo here are the leadership of the Interregional Cultural Ties with Foreign Countries Committee, or like government, actually, it's called. It's a special department under the Russia's president's administration. And the task of this cultural ties government is to actually carry out influence operations against neighboring countries, basically former Soviet Union countries. And it's like an arm's length away or continuation of the SVR being Russia's foreign intelligence. Why I'm talking about this is that we did an investigation, I think now, was it a year ago or 2 years ago, But we also tried to influence Estonia's politics, and we got our hands on the list of prospective young people from Estonia that they wanted to start cultivating. But let's build connections with them. Let's invest into their future, because then we will have someone who listens to our advice and then carries out what we will want. It's not like espionage as such, but it's to influence politics, to get Russia's Kremlin's voice a place inside Estonia's politics. And we first named here on this list Mikhail Culvert. At that time, he was vice mayor of Tallinn and an up-and-coming star. Right now, he's the mayor of Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, and probably the second most important person in the Centre Party, which is the second largest party in Estonia. A really highly important person in Estonia's politics. He speaks Russian as his first language, and he's immensely popular among the population in Tallinn. But he alone, if he would run alone on the elections without the help of his party, I think he would still win it easily.
And how did he react when he saw that his name was on this list?
I interviewed him for, I think, 1.5 hours, but what's very direct actually for him, he says that he hasn't felt any attempt to influence him. And we can't say that he was some kind of hired or influenced. We can just show that he was on the list. But at the same time, there has been other evidence already for years that are connecting Culvert with different influence operations that Russia has been doing. He had been organizing kind of youth camps in the Selinger area in Russia, which are known to be connected to different Kremlin organized organizations.
How far does this go back? How far did you think this went back?
I think this list as such comes from 2015, 2016, something like that. But the work is continuing. We can see here in this list as well, other people from the same Centre Party, which is very popular among the Russian community in Estonian language. By far the number one political party for Russian people living in Estonia. But we can also see here local Russian journalists, and then some activists. So these are the people they are trying to influence all the time. It's on one hand, it seems logical that yes, obviously we are trying to target, we are trying to recruit, we are trying to make you a useful idiot or a knowledgeable idiot for that sake, or an agent of influence. But to see this laid out in black and white, that this is actually a list of people they wanted to recruit or influence. That's something that
I guess we'll come on to this in a second, is when we see the other sort of influence operation and financing of people in opposition to government. That's when you join the dots. But go on, talk about this one here.
Yeah, the Historiическая память Foundation, it's the Foundation of Historical Memory, but it's actually a Gongo. It's not an NGO. It appears to be independent, but actually it is organized and run and controlled by the same General Chernov's department. We want to promote the intercultural whatever ties with countries like us. But actually, this NGO working out of St. Petersburg, the real task of it is to create and promote and amplify the image of the Baltic countries as little, small, stupid Nazi states. For years, it seemed funny to us here, how Russia was desperately trying to paint us to be small Nazis. But now when we see that it's exactly what we are using in Ukraine as an excuse, official excuse, and how much violence, torture, war crimes, victims this has brought on, and it's not funny at all. But again, we got through a leak, we got our hands on a document that details how this Historiическая память Foundation itself saw its goals or objectives, what to achieve. I will bring it out really quickly. First task was to carry out counteraction to efforts to qualify Soviet repressions as genocide. meaning that what Soviet was doing in Estonia, for example, mass deportations, but it didn't happen. Second, again, counteraction to the conception of the Holodomor, the 1930s Stalin time famine carried out in Ukraine, which resulted in I don't know how many millions of Ukrainian farmers, and not only farmers, people plainly dead out of starvation. Third, to expose the Baltic collaborators of the Holocaust and other Nazis, and promoting these Estonian or Baltic collaborators. That's exactly to paint a picture of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania as Nazi states. And then counteraction to the glorification of the Forest Brother movement. Forest Brothers are the partisans who fled to the forests to keep resisting against the Soviet occupation that followed as a result of the Second World War in the Baltic countries. So the narrative.
I think these, and if you're a patriot, or if you're trying to defend your nation, these, and I can think of Britain in terms of its involvement in Northern Ireland, and I could see people taking a sort of similar tack and trying to play down certain things and play up others. So that in itself, it doesn't seem nefarious. But the fact, I mean, you say these tasks were hidden away. They didn't actually. This was a document that they had hidden as part of their agenda.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually like how do you show the history? Like who wins about the narrative of history? Who has the right to say what actually happened in the history? Because all the Baltic countries, we see the Forest Brothers actually were fighting against the Soviet occupation. They were not like Nazi collaborators, but now the Kremlin organizations are trying to say that no, we only escaped to the forest actually to avoid being convicted for war crimes they committed for the Nazi Germany. That's not correct. And then finally, like to discredit the political regimes of the Baltic countries between two world wars. And the goal for that, to put it really simply, is that if you show that the Baltic countries weren't really independent between the First and Second World War, that means that they only got their independence in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. And that means that the countries can't have any claims against the Soviet Union as such, or Russia as its legal predecessor. I think I will not stop on that because we will run out of time. And now one story that I did with my colleague who turned my wife really quickly to go there for a BuzzFeed News about Russian propaganda.
I think just countries. To repeat, I think there's it's worth. I mean, you've been doing a lot of work, and you've uncovered stuff which has been released to, the major international newspapers. I've covered it, New York Times, BuzzFeed. You've had a whole range of discoveries out there, and I think there are three different parts to this. There's the sort of low-level criminality, which you talked about with the cigarette smuggling and the recruitment of very low-level people. There's the more high-level operations when you talk about. And this is well known, the support for political movements that are going to be critical of I'm thinking of the Front National in France, and thinking of Salvini in Italy, on that kind of level, which is very, very high level operation. And then there's the sort of the propaganda, which is this here. The
propaganda and then the influence operations that they have the Kremlin's. A big part of their goal is to keep at least the local Russian communities under their influence, so that they would keep on voting for Putin. They would keep on getting their news and ideas from Russian state TV. They would keep on objecting to have a school system in Estonia or Latvia in Estonian language, but we would be able to continue learning in Russian language, because in that way we are more easily influenced. Yeah. And then the big picture behind it is exactly the same again as we are seeing now from Ukraine, is that to make these parts of society welcome to what Kremlin wants. And that if Kremlin wants to get the peace out of Ukraine and then connect it to Russia, then these people living already in that territory would welcome Russia's or Kremlin's initiative. So that's the strategic picture why this propaganda is happening.
We're going to go into these discussion about some of these news articles in just a second. I'd love to get people's questions now. We're at 1:30, so please do put your questions in now if you want them dealt with soon. So I don't want them to sort of pile up before the end of the program, please. So do start putting your questions in the Q&A box, everyone, and then we will come to them in a second. Sorry, carry on, Holger.
Balt News, which comes in short probably from Baltic News, is a seemingly independent news site that was set up in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, somewhere around 2015, 2014, something like that. And again, like seemingly important, or very important words here. When interviewed, when they started Balt News, the editor-in-chief Alexander Kornilov, a Russian guy living in Estonia, was interviewed by Lithuanian news outlet, and he said that the concept of Balt News, it's a normal, entertaining, non-political portal. But no, in fact, it wasn't normal, it wasn't entertaining, and definitely not, it wasn't non-political. But this is one of the, I think, most important, but also like one of the coolest investigations I've ever done, that I got hands on like thousands of pages of Skype chat histories, of documents, of contracts, of documents that showed how the money moved, etc., etc.
So tell us specifically about that, how the money moves. And I think you've got some of the documentation here.
Yes, I've got because I'm going to just quickly walk through here. I could talk 2 hours about this case itself and bringing examples. But first of all, it wasn't normal and non-political. But the screenshot here shows part of the funding contract according to which Balt News was operating. It shows that the publisher Alt Media had signed a contract with Media Capital Holding, a Dutch company. But the address here, Kolpi, in Tallinn, Kolpi Street, doesn't exist. It's a mistake. It's misspelled. Why is it important? Because every quarter they signed a new contract with new companies. Like it started with a Dutch Media Capital Holding, then it moved on with SPN Media Solutions registered in Serbia, then Barcelona Ventures in Cyprus. But in all of these contracts, the same misspelled address in the English language of the text remained. In Russian side, it's correct, but in English it remained, which shows that actually it was a copy-paste contract. They just changed the names of the companies through which the money came.
So it's like the repeated mistake for each contract.
Yeah, exactly. It was running through the years, like through 2 or 3 years. I don't remember how many. What was the time span that we got the contracts through? We didn't receive much. We received like 11,400 euros in Estonia, I think, a month, which is like enough to have 2 or 3 people on your payroll. But that allowed, we have a Dutch financial investor who is giving us money to work. We have someone from Serbia, a Cyprus company, but that allowed to remain seemingly independent. But actually, when we got the contracts, we started looking into it. What we managed to prove is that at least 2 of the companies, the Dutch one and the Serbian one, were owned through different links, ultimately by Rossiya Sevodnya, and Rossiya Sevodnya being one of the main state-owned media companies in Russia, the one carrying out a lot of propaganda. So they kind of camouflaged the money to show that it's coming from the Netherlands, that it's European Western investors, but actually it was the money was sent directly from the Kremlin. Part 2, seemingly independent, but no, the Skype chats showed really nice how the editor-in-chief, independent editor-in-chief in Balt News Estonia, Alexander Kornilov, was every day receiving tasks from Alexander Svyazin. He is contacting the Kremlin, Rossiya Sevodnya, about which topics to cover. And the topics to cover were not like non-political or entertaining, like they said in the beginning, but on the opposite. They were most often to do with showing how the West is failing, how the West has a lot of political tensions, around the time we had the Greek financial crisis, to amplify messages about that, to amplify messages about police violence in the USA, about political clashes in other European countries. So again, like I said in the beginning, that they tested out things. They used like small countries like in Estonia also to test how it would work in larger countries. So basically this kind of influence operation, I think, is very close to what you could see after a few years' time in the States, but in a much larger level, when we were doing exactly the same influence work. And we found evidence that it wasn't only Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, but this the same Alexander Sviazin. I tried to interview him as well, of course, but he wasn't very helpful. But he had given the same daily tasks to Sputniks and other media organizations in Moldova, in Georgia, in Belarus, and so on. So we actually managed to prove that it's a big network. Yeah.
We'll keep talking about this, but I've got a good question. If we can bring Hookie Walker in, who's got a question, which just picks up on exactly what we're talking about here. I don't know if we've got Hookie there. Let me just see if on the grid. If we've got it up here.
Can you ask me the question, because I'm in screen sharing mode. I can't open the Q&A box.
Okay, don't worry. Hookie, go ahead with your question.
I'm not sure whether you can hear me.
We can hear you clearly. Go on.
No, my very simple question out of huge ignorance. These varied propaganda efforts, are they all run by one organization in Moscow, or is there a certain division of duties between various organizations?
I don't know about the division of duties, but there are a few different ones that do run such efforts. But Russia Сегодня is definitely one of the most important systems inside Russia. The other one, sometimes they also carry it out not through state-owned companies, but probably, like, for example, owned by someone close to the Kremlin, who the Kremlin can trust to carry out their tasks, such as Konstantin Malofeyev, who runs the Tsargrad TV station, which is one of the ugliest examples of really hardcore anti-Western, anti-Baltic propaganda.
Holger, just give us an idea of for example, the amount of money. I mean, if you look at, is it RTV's budget, annual budget? Do you know what their annual budget is, roughly?
Hundreds of millions.
I think it's more than Estonia's GDP, isn't it, in 1 year, isn't it?
I don't want to make that comparison because I don't have exact numbers here. But let's presume that RTV's or Russia Сегодня's annual budget is somewhere around 300 million euros, 500 million euros. And to counteract Russian propaganda, Estonian state created a public broadcasting TV station, ETV Plus, which is in Russian language, do proper independent Russian language news, to do proper Russian entertainment original, and so on. And the annual budget for that is somewhere like 1.5 million euros.
Yeah, so, but also what comes across from this is that it's just the comprehensive nature of it. I mean, we've talked about the different levels of recruitment, but also organizationally, the enormity, the number of organizations tasked with not just propaganda, but recruitment of individuals or influencing of individuals, not to mention the actual spy work.
Yeah, and I just want to correct that. No, it definitely can't be equal or close to Estonia's GDP. Estonia's GDP is somewhere 300-400 billion euros, so it's still a different magnitude. But in TV, for example, a huge problem with Russian propaganda is that yes, they do Russian propaganda seemingly independently through Estonian media outlets as well. But the real problem is the Russian state-owned TV channels. Because they are publicly available. All the content is created inside Russia, And they are so very popular. They have been so very popular for dozens of years already, because the level of entertainment value that you get from Russian state TV channels is actually very good. All the comedy shows, all the talk shows, and so on.
Yeah, even with the news shows, they do it like Fox News or CNN.
Exactly. And then you put like
the expert talking heads.
Yeah. So, and in order to compete with stuff like that, you also need to have a very strong entertainment program in TV. But if you have a budget of like, let's say, 2 million euros, maybe 3 million euros, you can't make anything comparable.
Let's just go through a bit more on this, and then I think we'll come back. We'll move away from the slideshow.
And just really quickly, the last part of this, that first, remember that they got the money. Second, they got the tasks from Moscow. And third part was that every month, the independent news sites needed to send back reports to the Kremlin. With all the headlines they had done, with all the number of page views, the number of comments, and so every month they needed to send it in order to continue receiving the money. And the fun part about that was that this specific group was so poor in what they were doing. Like the outcome of their propaganda was so bad that no one was like actually reading or following them, just a few thousand people. But they started buying comments, and they started buying page views just to trick their Kremlin runners. But why I love this investigation is that it gave the whole picture that yes, that they weren't like highly effective, but like for the same money, I could have done it like much better for sure. They were just like not too skilled in what we were doing. But the complexity of the scheme really indicates that Kremlin took this project like very importantly. Like they put a lot of effort into it.
Okay, Holger, let's pull out of the slideshow now and just have a bit of a chat, because I think and I'm keen for people to be able to put questions to you. We've just had a fascinating time with you in the Baltics, and it's an area we'd focused on because obviously I think possibly more than other people we were concerned about Russia's trajectory, and the big concern was some kind of hybrid warfare, and there was this big focus on as you say, propaganda, the idea of Russia creating a disturbance in the population. Estonia, I think I'm right in saying, has got the largest Russian population of the 3 Baltic states. Is that right?
Estonia's got the second. Do you mean the Russian population in Estonia? It's higher in Latvia, but
right.
Let's say 25 to 30% of Estonia's population is actually like Russian speaking.
Yeah. So the big fear was that you would have a disturbance created up, an excuse for Russia to try and defend its population, and then you come in and they'd have some kind of you'd have very quickly a situation that couldn't be dealt with on the ground because there wouldn't be the troops to deal with it, or that Estonia or NATO wouldn't know how to deal with it. What's the assessment now, A, of that risk, and B, then can you tell us about how Estonia and the Baltic states have responded to it? So let's just talk about that risk. So thinking about hybrid warfare, thinking about the risks from Russia at the moment. What's your assessment? What's the political assessment now?
Well, pretty much all the examples that I brought to you are part of hybrid warfare, because that carries they are just like small portions of it. But in terms of escalating or causing something to happen here, yes, we are aware of it, but we don't see the threat level right now as very high. And also, I think that the threat of direct military conflict coming from Russia towards Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania was really high in February and then March this year. But thanks, and because of Ukraine, because Russia didn't achieve the quick 72-hour shock and awe type of victory in Ukraine, and they have actually taken away a really significant amount of military personnel, military units, military equipment, and ammunition from close to our borders with Russia. It means that we don't see right now like imminent military threat happening here. But at the same time, the strategic threat is much higher than it has been like over the last 5 years. So it's kind of like difficult to sell to a society as well, but kind of like, yes, the security situation is really tight right now. We need to increase our military budget. But no, at the same time, we don't see anything happening like today or tomorrow. It's kind of like paradoxical, but that's the way the situation is right now. And Estonia has now increased their defense budget by 700 million euros, I think. But yes, like one-time installments. We are now investing into like mid-range air defense and stuff like that.
I just want to recap on that. I think there are three parts to what you just said. One is that if Russia had been successful, the precedent that would have been set would have been incredibly dangerous for the Baltics, because Russia would have been able to walk into another state and essentially achieve what it wanted to fairly quickly. And therefore, NATO would have been seen as ineffective, or at least the West has proven to be ineffective. Now, to a degree, that threat obviously still exists there, but because Russia is preoccupied militarily, that's not going to happen now. But it does leave the ultimate question, which is, can those three states defend themselves? Can NATO defend themselves? And the conclusion is, at the moment, is no. And so, what's being done to defend them?
I don't know if the question, if the answer to the question actually is no, because one of the good things, as I see, but yes, like European response has been slow and it took time as well. But still, like from NATO's perspective and NATO members' perspective, I think that the reaction to the war in Ukraine has been actually pretty good and pretty strong. European Union has put on like really strong sanctions against Russia. NATO has shown a lot of unity, even though we are seeing like Germany, France, Italy not doing as much as they could be doing, as they should be doing. But Germany is changing now, at least they're looking to be changing. So I think that that kind of unity also gives a strong sign to the Kremlin, to Putin. But maybe if we tried something in Latvia or Estonia, maybe NATO actually would work. Maybe they wouldn't allow it.
That might be the political reaction. There might be a renewed determination to see that you need to increase your military forces, and that Russia needs to know that there will be a threat will be dealt with. But if you look at, I'm sure you're familiar with Sir Richard Shirreff's book and his analysis. I can't remember, what's it called, Blood in the Snow? I can't remember the name of the book. And he essentially says that NATO is not capable of putting a division into the field. It does not have the military capacity to actually deal with a full-scale fight. Now, one's pretty, from their point of view, pretty happy that Russia has shown itself to be so ineffective. But I think there is a conclusion that the Baltic states are not sufficiently defended. And obviously that's why there's all this commitment of material there at the moment.
The Estonian Prime Minister said out in an interview to the Financial Times 3 weeks ago that the NATO defense plans for Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania are out right now, or that first Russia will start their military operations, their war aggression against the Baltic countries. They would take the territory, and then after 6 months of time, NATO would be able to actually start trying to get the territory back, which means that us here at the same time seeing again what's happening in Bucha and then wherever, we'd all be slaughtered and killed. So that is something now that has been, I think that the attention is where to actually change it. And one really important thing to consider is that we have Sweden and NATO, Sweden and Finland. And if Sweden and Finland are like so close to getting officially members of NATO, that will actually change a lot, both in terms of how much NATO is capable, but also for the real operational defense plans of the Baltic countries, because that will basically make the Baltic Sea the internal sea of NATO. And then the strength of Finnish army, for example, also Swedish, but especially that of Finnish, is huge. I think we are the second largest European army or something like that. That's because we're also because we share like 1,500 kilometers of border with Russia.
Yeah.
So we are seeing I can't say that these are good signs, but these are things that give me a reason to be somewhat optimistic. But I'm not like that doomsayer. But nothing, no one will come to help us.
You're talking about you're saying the trend is in the right direction. That's sweet.
Yeah, the trend is in the right direction, and obviously we need to remember that the countries are so damn small here that we have like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania all together. We are 6 million people, so that's not much.
Holger, talk us through some of the stories you're doing at the moment, and please, everyone, do ask questions. Put questions in the Q&A box. If you don't, we're going to wrap it up very shortly. But Holger, just give us a flavour of what you've been reporting on recently.
Let me think now. I'm trying to find some examples that I put for you. One interesting thing that share screen. Yes, I think you can see that we have been tracking the far-right movements, not only in Estonia, but across European Union. And why we have been tracking this again to see there's nothing new in
I think this is absolutely fascinating, this one here.
How the Kremlin is actually influencing, organizing and funding far-right parties in Europe.
I want to jump in here because you focus on Matteo Salvini here. And obviously
Salvini threatened to sue us for that story.
Yeah. And there is an assistant or someone who's close to him who is the Kremlin's contact, regular contact, in order to have access to him. And when the war breaks out, not long after the war breaks out, his contact no longer has access to Salvini, and the Russians are very concerned about it. Just say what you discovered here.
Yes, it's as you told. I don't have much to add here. Yeah. But yes, Salvini's contact was a guy whose last name was Savoini, like really close to Salvini, but Savoini. And the documents that we have from Russia, from the same Tsargrad organization, they show how Russians were planning how to find a new contact with Salvini's party at the time when the Italian security services had actually caught wind of what the Savoini was doing in Moscow, having meetings with really high-level political figures in the Kremlin, and trying to arrange 5 million euro kickback, bribe, illegal donation to La Liga through a fake or forged oil deal. So we got this internal picture from inside the Russian organizations of how they actually tried to build, how they tried to enforce, make stronger the far-right parties in Germany, AfD, in France, Marine Le Pen's party, in Italy, La Liga, but also importantly, how they want the far-right parties of Europe to make a network, to start amplifying each other's messages, to start sounding stronger and affecting more people. So that's actually everything that would go directly in alignment with what the Kremlin would want to receive.
I'm going to share the links to these stories here for everyone before we finish off. So you should have, everybody, in the chat box a link to some of the most recent stories that Holger and his team have worked on. And it's really, I mean, the detail that they go into is amazing, and the overview is wonderful. And I think it really is worth having a look there. So do have a look in the chat box if you want to catch up on some of those stories.
I'm gonna show you about Wagner. Private military company Wagner. I had some slides on the slideshow, but there's also a link to the story. But we did that story. We ran in November last year when I was traveling all around Ukraine with my Swedish colleague Matthias Karsel. Wagner, private military company, is right now plays also a very significant part in the war in Ukraine. Russia is using Wagner PMC to conduct some of the most horrible events there. And this guy on the photo, Dmitry Utkin, his nickname actually is Wagner. He is the alleged commander and then creator of the private military company. And Wagner consists of 3 different types of people. First of all, ex-military, people connected to GRU, Russian military intelligence. Then they have like bounty hunters or people they recruit from the field. Who want to earn much money, but who don't necessarily have much military experience, but people who have criminal backgrounds and who are willing to go out and kill, and so on. So Wagner has been like, first it was detected in 2014 in eastern Ukraine already, and then now we are back there. We have been all over Africa, we've been into Latin America, and then now we are back in Ukraine. But anyway, we got our hands on a database of 4,200 Wagner mercenaries. Their names, their bios, their birth dates, their addresses, their photos from their social media, and so on. And we were thinking like, what to do with this database, what to do, like how to make a story. And in the end, what we did was that we filtered out the mercenaries who were from Ukraine, from either like the site which still is like controlled by Ukraine or which was occupied already in 2014 and later. And then we drove with my Swedish colleague to knock on their doors and to talk with their families. Many of them had been killed in different places, Syria or whatever. These are the photos of some of the mercenaries. And
so where were they living? Where I don't quite understand this. So these are working for Wagner, but you're saying these are people who recruited from in Ukraine. I'm just trying to. So at what point did you go? This is before the war.
It's before the current war.
Yeah,
before the current war. But like the war in Ukraine has actually been going on since 2014, as we know. Yeah, but some of these people were recruited from places like Kharkiv, from places like Odessa, from Kiev, even from all over Ukraine. Most of them have like Russian background, but not all of them. And yeah, we went to knock on the doors of them and their families, and especially we took care to knock on the doors of such mercenaries who had been killed either in Ukraine, in Syria, somewhere in Africa, whatever. And we wanted to talk to their wives, widows, their children, their parents, their moms, and to understand that these are not like classical military guys who went on to become mercenaries. They were like real people. They didn't have like enough perspective in their life. They were working maybe on construction. They didn't make money. They were making 200 euros a month in their old jobs. You can't find like any high-paying or lucrative jobs on the places where we were living. And here in Wagner, we were offered salaries starting from 1,700 euros, free meals, travel, interesting experiences, and such. So they kind of took the easy way. They thought that they would get rich, but a lot of them ended up being killed. And to hear the stories of the families that they had left behind, that allowed us to kind of like recreate the story of how do you actually become a mercenary that will end up committing war crimes, such as raping or chopping people's heads off, their feet off, setting their bodies.
And did you make that direct link between some of the people who've done those things?
Yes. One of the most notorious Wagner mercenaries, a guy actually from Moldova. We visited his hometown, home village as well, and then talked to his teachers and whoever were around there. He was involved in a war crime in Syria, where they caught one deserter from the Syrian army who was forced to serve in the Syrian army, but he tried to escape and then to go back to his family, and they caught him somewhere in the desert, and they tortured him. I think I shouldn't be telling maybe the gruesome details, but that kind of there was a video of them torturing them. It's still available on internet. And they were playing football with his head and stuff like that.
And is he alive, that man? Is he alive?
No, he got killed in 2019, I think, in Syria, 2019 in Syria in a US attack. He died of wounds received about a month later. But he was planning to leave Wagner, but what connects these people is that they lacked any kind of social understandings about how life should work. They lacked parental control when we were growing up. They came from poor families, from broken up families. Very often they didn't have fathers, or if they had fathers around, then there was a lot of violence inside the family. We interviewed psychologists who had been studying mercenaries, and they said that the reason these people are able to kill without any problems in their mind is that they come from so broken families where they've had problems forming any meaningful social connections throughout their life. So and these are the people that Russia is turning right now more and more and more to actually go and fight in Syria. These are the people who don't have problem committing war crimes like they were in Bucha. Yeah. Because Russia hasn't been announcing a mobilization, so they need to get the mercenaries from somewhere. So they offer them good money and possibility to.
So, Holger, we've got a question from Chris Evans. So let's take Chris. Chris, go ahead if you can hear us. Are you there? Is Chris online? So I'll take Chris. Maybe he's online. He can't open the microphone. Since Holger's commented on developments in Austria, Italy, and Germany, does he have any views about Russian influence in the UK? Are you there, Chris? No. Do you have any? What are your? Have you done reports?
I haven't worked. I haven't worked on Russian influence in UK myself. So all my ideas come from what plentiful of our news organizations and journalists have been reporting about. And obviously, besides influencing politics, we also know about the influence of Russian oligarchic money in London, for example. Actually, there was one story that we did. That we did in April this year, where a Russian diplomat, Sergei Nalobin, was expelled from Estonia. He was the chief of mission in Russian embassy in Tallinn, Russia's embassy in Tallinn. And what we didn't understand was how the hell was he even able to get diplomatic accreditation in Estonia, because this guy had been through a lot of trouble in London.
Can you scroll the picture? Yeah, there we go. Sorry.
No, he wasn't there. That was another guy.
Right.
Looks like we don't have his photo here. We have an Estonian story, but that's what we did. We published it also on Newlands magazine. But he had built influence network inside the Conservative Party, and then posing with Boris Johnson and the wall 5 or 6 years ago. But it's an interesting story. But if you haven't read about Sergei Nalobin and what he was doing in the UK, I think The Guardian wrote about it at that time, pretty extensively. Then you can get the understanding that Russia tried the same in operations.
The questions have been asked in Parliament now, and it's always been in the news for some time. But it still amazes me how likely the Conservatives have been treated in terms of the amount of Russian donations to the party, and promotion of that sort of open relationship. We're also the Russian control of the media here as well, which is quite startling. Holger, we're going to have to wrap it up there. That's our up. Thank you very much indeed. It's a very detailed and comprehensive approach that you've given us. And if anyone's interested in traveling to the Baltics with us, you can meet Holger in person. Thanks very much indeed for your time. It's been really good.
Okay, thank you. Bye.